The first sign of trouble arrived in the form of a stiff white envelope shoved into my mailbox like some official decree from a medieval kingdom. I tore it open, expecting another pointless HOA update. Instead, I found this gem. Notice of property violation. Your land has been classified as a public botanical garden. Immediate action is required. I blinked, then I blinked again. A botanical what? I stood there in my driveway, the summer sun baking down on me, rereading the words like they might magically change if I glare hard enough. My farm, a private farm, was suddenly considered public by the HOA. A dry laugh bubbled up. They had to be kidding. I crushed the letter in my fist and marched inside, tossing it onto my kitchen counter like it was contaminated. This was going to be a problem. The next morning, I stepped onto my porch, coffee steaming in my mug, only to be met with a sight that nearly made me choke. A group of HOA board members stood just outside my fence, clipboard in hand, whispering and pointing at my crops like I was growing illegal substances instead of tomatoes and rosemary. Leading the charge was Claire Lancaster, HOA president, queen of rules, the kind of woman who wore expensive blazers to neighborhood meetings and somehow always smelled like lavender and passive aggression. I took a slow sip of my coffee, then strolled over. Morning, Claire. Lovely day for trespassing. She flashed a tight-lipped smile. This isn't a personal visit, Hank. The board is conducting an inspection. For what? She motioned toward my garden like it was evidence in a court case. Your property has been classified as a public botanical garden due to the variety of plants, accessibility, and the fact that some community members have entered without issue. I scoffed. You mean Karen from next door, who took a shortcut through my yard once? Claire shrugged. Regardless, we need to enforce HOA regulations. This means you either comply with public access laws, allowing visitors at designated hours, or you face penalties. I narrowed my eyes. And if I don't? Claire's fake smile sharpened. Fines, liens, maybe even property seizure. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders back. I dealt with storms, droughts, and wild coyotes. But this was a different kind of predator. She thought she had me trapped. Too bad she didn't know who controlled her power. You see, Claire's fancy HOA-approved house sat on a section of the grid that relied on supplemental power from my farm. When they built this neighborhood, the developers underestimated the power demands. So a deal was struck. I provided backup electricity to a few homes, including Claire's, in exchange for reduced restrictions on my land use. Apparently, Claire forgot about that little arrangement. I decided to let her enjoy her moment, let her think she was in control, until the perfect moment to remind her who really ran this show. The opportunity came on a particularly sweltering evening. 97 degrees, not a whisper wind. At 7:30 p.m., right when Claire was settling in, probably sipping expensive wine, while watching one of those reality shows she'd never admit to enjoying, I flipped the switch. Not the whole grid, just her house. Within 2 minutes, I got a text. Claire, hey, weird question. Did you just lose power? I smirked. Me? Oh no, Claire. That's terrible. Maybe a grid issue? You know, the one I warned the HOA about when they cut costs? Silence. I waited. Then at 8:15 p.m., another message. Claire, any chance you can help? I know your farm still has power. I tapped my fingers against my phone, letting her stew a little longer before responding. Me. I'd love to, Claire, but I'm a little tied up dealing with this whole public botanical garden issue. You understand, right? I could almost hear her teeth grinding through the phone. The next morning, I wasn't surprised when Claire showed up at my door, looking less like a dictator and more like a desperate homeowner. She held herself stiffly, like she hated every second of this. I think we should talk. I leaned against my doorframe. Oh, what about? She inhaled sharply, like she was about to swallow a bitter pill. The board may have rushed a decision about your farm. I raised an eyebrow. Rushed? Claire, I thought you guys followed the rules. Her jaw tightened. Perhaps, Upon further review, your land doesn't quite meet the criteria for a public botanical garden. I let the words hang in the air, letting her feel that loss. Then I smiled. So, it's private property again. Her nod was almost painful. Yes, but... I crossed my arms. No buts, Claire. A long pause. Then, she sighed. Fine, it's private. A week later, the HOA held a meeting to make it official. Claire stood at the podium, clearing her throat as she read the updated ruling. After further review, the board has determined that Hank Walker's farm is not classified as a public botanical garden. No fines, no forced public access, just total, undeniable defeat. And I enjoyed every second of it. But Claire? Oh! She wasn't done with me yet. Epilogue, the final request. A few days later, Claire knocked on my door again. This time, she wasn't carrying a clipboard. She was holding a gift basket. I folded my arms, amused. What's this? A bribe? She exhaled. A peace offering. Then, after an awkward pause, she added, and I was wondering if I could get on your farm's power plan permanently. I let the request sit between us, savoring the sweet, sweet irony. Finally, I gave her a slow smirk. We'll see. And shut the door. For a few weeks, I let myself believe that things were finally back to normal. The HOA had backed off, Claire had admitted defeat, and my farm was still my farm. But if there's one thing I should have learned by now, it's this. People like Claire don't lose quietly. It started with small things. A few anonymous complaints about my property. A couple of unexplained delays with deliveries. Then one morning, I stepped outside and found a bright orange violation. Notice zip-tied to my fence. Unapproved structure detected. Remove immediately. I frowned, scanning my farm. Everything was exactly the same. Except, near my barn, I spotted 3 HOA board members whispering like a bunch of middle school kids spreading a nasty rumor. I sighed, tossing my coffee into grass. Here we go again. I didn't even bother being polite this time. Marching over, I held up the violation notice. Which one of you geniuses wants to explain this? The shortest of the 3, Martin, the HOA's so-called compliance officer, adjusted his tie like he was about to give a PowerPoint presentation. It's a matter of neighborhood safety. Hank, that barn of yours. My barn? I interrupted. The same barn that's been here for 30 years? Martin hesitated. Yes. Well, it appears it wasn't properly registered under the HOA's revised building codes. I crossed my arms. Revised? You mean the ones you changed last week? He coughed. Rules are rules. I let out a slow breath. And what happens if I don't comply? Fines, Martin said quickly. Then, after a dramatic pause, he added, and possible demolition. Ah, so this is how Claire wants to play it. Fine. She wanted a war? She just got one. For the next 3 days, I did nothing but dig through county records, HOA bylaws, and zoning laws. And then, I hit gold. Buried in the county's paperwork was something called a grandfather clause, which basically said that any structure built before 1995 was protected from new HOA regulations. Guess when my barn was built? 1994. I smiled to myself. The next morning, I strolled into the HOA office like I was walking into a bar fight. I knew I'd win. Martin barely had time to look up before I dropped a thick binder of legal documents onto his desk. I'd like to file an official counter violation. Martin blinked. Hey, what? I tapped the page in front of him. Turns out my barn is exempt from your little rule change. Claire, who had been eavesdropping from the corner, crossed her arms. Fine, she muttered. You win this one. She turned to leave, then paused. But don't think this is over. I grinned. Claire, I was counting on it. Word spread fast that I had beaten the HOA again. And it did something I didn't expect. It gave other people the courage to fight back. First, my neighbor Mike found some shady financial reports from the HOA. Turns out, they'd been raising fees without proper approval. Then, another neighbor, Sarah, started an online petition to reduce HOA power. Within a week, The HOA board was getting bombarded with complaints. And Claire? She was losing control. I knew Claire wouldn't go down without one last desperate move. I just didn't expect it to be this ridiculous. One morning, I stepped outside and nearly fell over laughing, because sitting in my yard, big, bold, and obnoxious, was a giant for sale sign on my property. I snapped a picture and sent it to Claire. Me, nice try. 5 minutes later, she was at my doorstep, looking murderous. I warned you, Hank. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. And I warned you, I'm not going anywhere. Her hands clenched into fists, and for a second, I thought she might actually throw a punch. Then, just like that, the fight drained out of her. She yanked the sign out of my yard, threw it into her car, and left without another word. A few months later, the neighborhood held a vote, and Claire, she was voted out as HOA president. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came a few weeks later, when there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Claire. No clipboard, no smug attitude, just Claire. I need power, she finally admitted. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I slowly reached for my door handle. I'll think about it. And shut it. Life had finally settled down. Claire was out. The HOA had backed off. For the first time in years, I was free to enjoy my farm without feeling like I was being watched. And then, one day, I come home, and there's a letter waiting for me. Not just any letter. A lawsuit. I read it once, then twice, and I actually laughed out loud. Claire was suing me for being a nuisance to the community. Noise complaints, environmental hazards, unregulated waste disposal. I shook my head. This woman was certifiably insane. My farm wasn't just clean. It was one of the most well-maintained properties in the entire area. But that didn't matter to Claire. She wasn't fighting for the community. She was fighting because she couldn't stand losing. Fine. She wanted to drag me into court. I'd give her a front row seat to her own humiliation. I walked into that courtroom like I was walking into a bar fight. I knew I'd win. Claire had actually hired a lawyer for this. Me? I didn't need one, because facts were on my side. Her lawyer, some guy who looked like he only took the case for the paycheck, started rattling off complaints. Your Honor, the defendant operates noisy industrial machinery well into the night. The judge glanced at me. I smiled. Your Honor, my farm equipment is off by 6 p.m. every single day. I have records and camera footage to prove it. Claire's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The defendant has also been seen dumping hazardous chemicals. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what chemicals are those? Silence. Then, we don't have that information at this time. The judge looked at him like he just said the dumbest thing imaginable. After 20 minutes of nonsense accusations, the judge sighed. Do you have any real evidence? Claire stiffened. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Well, No, you don't. The judge slammed his gavel. Case dismissed. Just like that. As I walked past Claire, I leaned in and whispered, next time, just bake me a congratulations cake and save yourself the lawyer fees. Her glare could have melted steel. After that embarrassing disaster, Claire finally lost her grip on the neighborhood. And Mike, my neighbor, the guy who exposed all the shady HOA financials, was elected as the new president. His first order of business? Undoing every ridiculous rule Claire had put in place. Overnight, it was like the neighborhood came back to life. Gardens started popping up again. People painted their houses however they wanted. For the first time in years, people actually liked living here again. And me, for the first time in a long while, I actually felt at peace. Until one evening, just as I was closing up my barn, I heard a knock at my front door. I opened it, and there she was, Claire. But this time, she wasn't wearing her usual smug expression. For a long moment, we just stood there. Me, Claire, the woman who had spent years making my life a nightmare. I need power, she said quietly. I blinked. Excuse me. She shifted uncomfortably. I lost my special privileges with the HOA. They cut me off from the emergency grid. My generator's dead. She swallowed hard. I need your help. I crossed my arms. You mean the same help you try to destroy me over? She winced. I know how this looks. Oh, I don't think you do, Claire. She let out a breath. Look, I was wrong, okay? I went too far. But I don't have a choice right now. I studied her. For the first time ever, Claire actually looked human, tired, defeated, maybe even a little ashamed. For a long moment, I just stood there, letting her sweat. Then, finally, I sighed. Fine. She blinked. Wait, seriously? I nodded. But I'm putting in a separate breaker just for you. The second you try anything funny, I'm cutting it off. She exhaled in relief. That's fair. She turned to leave, then hesitated. Thanks. I smirked. Don't get used to it. Weeks passed, then months. The neighborhood thrived under Mike's leadership. People actually enjoyed living here again. As for Claire, she kept to herself. No more power plays. No more HOA nonsense. And one day, as I was working in my garden, I noticed her walking by. For a second, I thought she was going to ignore me. Then she stopped, looked at my farm for a long moment, and nodded. Looks good, she said. And for the first time since I'd known her, she actually meant it. Maybe people really can change. Maybe. But I still wasn't taking down my, HOA trespassing sign. Just in case.